something that we were talking about, sort of setting the scene in the picture going up into this weekend. There were a number of things still at play. There were a ton of different scenarios, a lot of things on the line, depending on which club you were in that upper half of the table and which club you were, maybe even on the outside looking in. Going into this weekend, there were still two playoff spots up for grabs, and there were technically four teams or three teams in the hunt for either of those spots. And then you had the Shield and both first and second place still on the line. Thorns reigning the current, and San Diego, technically, if they scored a madness of goals, were also in contention for the Shield and in a possibility of a first place. So a lot of stuff in play going into this weekend. So we had anticipated, some pretty good matches were going to take place over the course of the weekend, and all those things got dusted and settled out. And we'll talk about how they were. But in terms of where things lie now, full official final standings of all the teams and their positions on the table. It's OL Reign, number one, taking first place, and the Shield. It's Portland Thorns in second place, San Diego Wave FC in third, Houston Dash in fourth, and Kansas City in fifth. And Chicago Red Stars claiming that sixth and final playoff spot. And everyone going to be watching from home. North Carolina Courage at 7, Angel City FC at 8, Racing Louisville at 9, Orlando Pride at 10, Washington Spirit at 11, and Gotham FC in 12th place. But exciting times. It sort of feels a little bit different when you kind of see it in front of your face like that, when you're just kind of like, wow, this is how things shook out a little bit. And obviously with the conclusion of the regular season, that also pivots attention. Yes, we're pivoting our attention to the playoffs and what's going to happen in the postseason. But what's going to also happen now at the conclusion of the regular season is a lot of things like individual awards are going to be coming into play. And the first of those was also decided as well. So while something like Rookie of the Year or MVP or Defender of the Year or Goalkeeper of the Year, Coach of the Year, all that stuff gets voted on and in phases. So that will come, I'm sure, at a later date as playoffs come closer. But the first of those individual awards tends to already be decided by the time a regular season concludes, and that's the Golden Boot race. Alex Morgan walking away with this one. 15 goals, her first NWSL Golden Boot in her career. But this got really it got really close towards the final stretch of this season here between some of these players.
It really did. I mean, it came down to the final days. We talked about it in the preview. If Debinha ended up getting a back-to-back hat trick, something that had never been done before in the NWSL, that could have happened. Sophia Smith was right on the cusp heading into the weekend. She started the weekend with 12 goals. So if she scored 3, she would have been in contention. She actually would have jumped Alex Morgan because assists was the tiebreaker. She ends up getting 2. You can see there, Alex Morgan 15, Smith with 14, and Debinha ends with 12, the top 3 right there. But I mean, a lot of prolific goal scorers this year in the NWSL. And I think, a special shout out to Alex Morgan because she notched 15 goals. She wins the Golden Boot at the end of this year, and she didn't even play in San Diego's final regular season match, where perhaps it could have been 16 or 17 on that standings. So she had this Golden Boot in the bag before this final weekend of play. And I think that's really important to touch on because she was out due to injury.
Yeah, I think there were eyes on what was going to happen in this final weekend in terms of, the players sort of chasing this Golden Boot. I think Sophia Smith obviously making things interesting there, and we had talked a lot about Debinha, but with all the chaos scenarios that have kind of come into play over the weekend, we were also like, hey, we're not going to count out Diana Ordonez. We're definitely not going to count out Mal Pugh. We've seen more maddening things before in terms of things kind of shaking out for the Golden Boot and within games in general. But it belongs to Alex Morgan in 2022. The goal that ended up sort of sinking it for her, came by a brace. I think it was in that wild 4-3 match against the Spirit back in September. So she ended up getting another penalty, and I think it was her only header of the season, quite frankly. That's the other thing I think that's kind of like interesting coming out of this Golden Boot race. There were obviously a moment of times very earlier in the season where Morgan was converting these penalty kicks. A lot of these goals came by her left foot, I believe 12 of them off her left, 2 off her right, and then the one goal that ended up sort of claiming and ensuring that she got the Golden Boot ended up being a header. So I thought that was kind of fun to sort of take a look at how all the goals were scored and kind of shook out there. But in terms of titles and folks taking home titles, there was also the Shield. We talked a little bit about. And in terms of that still being up for grabs, and of course, it came down to two teams with a bitter rivalry, the longest standing rivalry in OL Reign and Portland Thorns. They had to take care of business though against two other teams, and maybe that's kind of like how this ended up shaking out, that there was one team that didn't end up handling their business on the road, and one team did.
That's honestly what it came down to. In my opinion, this was Portland Shield to lose because they were going up against a Gotham side that hadn't won a game in how many weeks. They hadn't been scoring goals consistently. Yes, they were going on the road, challenging to play at Red Bull Arena against this Gotham side that truly had nothing to lose. But for Portland, they had already clinched the playoffs. But in order to kind of go out with a bang in the regular season and start the playoffs on a right foot, they needed to win this game against Gotham, and they didn't. They end up drawing 3-3. I mean, you can score 3 goals. They go up 3-1 over Gotham and then end up conceding 2. And in my mind, that's Portland's loss. Like they lost that game and they lost the Shield. Of course, OL Reign, then all they had to do is go out and win their match against Orlando, and makes things a little bit easier for them, knowing that their rival Portland Thorns kind of wet the bed on their game. And then it was OL Reign's Shield to win at the end of it all. And they did just that, because based on how the games played out, Portland played 5 hours before OL Reign. So Laura Harvey even talked about before the Reign game against Orlando, they would know what they needed to do, whether it was, okay, we're playing for a number 2 spot or we're playing for the Shield. And you could tell that the OL Reign players were just so jazzed up, knowing that if they got 3 points, they got on the board first, they held Orlando, they would walk away with the Shield, which was clearly what happened at the end of it all.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna definitely chat a little bit more about how that scenario came to life in terms of, watching a Shield race between 2 different games, because that was the other side of this is the scheduling of some of these games. We were like keeping an eye on things. There were kickoffs taking place within just half hours of each other, and some games that were happening earlier in the day and then later in the day.